The emergency beacon tore through the cosmic silence like a scream in the night. Admiral Jake Thompson felt his heart skip a beat as the transmission pierced through Terra. Prime's communication arrays at 0347 hours, the kind of call that turns peaceful nights into living nightmares. The command center's holographic displays erupted with cascading alien symbols, each character pulsing red with desperate urgency. Jake had seen plenty of distress calls in his 23 years of service, but this one was different. This one made his veteran hands tremble as he gripped the tactical console. Computer priority translation, all channels, he barked, his voice cutting through the pre-dawn quiet of the bridge. The universal translator's synthetic voice filled the chamber with words that would haunt. Jake's dreams forever, *, help us, please. The Void Hunters approach our world. 18 billion souls hang in the balance. We are defenseless. Its estimated arrival in 4 hours. By the ancient stars, someone hear us. ... This is our final transmission *. Then nothing. Dead static. Kind of silence that screams louder than any alarm. Damn it. Jake's fist crashed down on the tactical display with enough force to crack the reinforced glass. The impact sent shockwaves through his arm, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in his chest. 18 billion lives. 18 billion innocent souls about to be butchered while he stood helpless in his pristine command center. You know that feeling when you're watching a disaster unfold on the news, knowing you can't do anything about it. Multiply that by 18 billion, and you might understand what Jake felt in that moment. Commander Beth Rodriguez's station lit up like a Christmas tree as her fingers danced across the tracking systems. Her normally composed face had gone ghost white, and when she looked up at Jake, he saw his own horror reflected in her eyes. Signal origin confirmed, Admiral, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Proxima 7, Kepler Sector.
It's the Calari homeworld.
The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The Calari, those gentle, rabbit-like beings who had welcomed humanity into their corner of the galaxy with open arms. They were the ones who had shared their revolutionary medical technology, saving millions of human lives from diseases that had plagued Earth for centuries. They were teachers, healers, philosophers. They wouldn't hurt a fly if their lives depended on it, and now the Void Hunters were coming for them. Jake's mind raced through tactical possibilities like a supercomputer, calculating impossible odds. The Void Hunters weren't just raiders, they were galactic nightmares made flesh. Savage, technologically advanced, and utterly without mercy. They didn't just conquer worlds, they harvested them. Every living being would be either enslaved or processed into biofuel for their war machine. Beth, what's our response time with conventional forces? Her fingers flew across her console, pulling up fleet deployment data that Jake already knew would be devastating news. Sir, our nearest patrol group is the Victory and her escorts. They're 6 days out at maximum burn. The Void Hunters will have already ... double table quotes. She couldn't finish the sentence. 6 days. Jake closed his eyes and tried not to imagine what 18 billion corpses would look like. But wait, there was another option. Terrible, treaty-breaking, career-ending option that could start an interstellar war. Jake's eyes snapped open, and for the first time since the transmission arrived, he felt something other than despair. He felt rage. Beth, signal the Hellbringer, Ragnarok, and Apocalypse. Emergency jump authorization. Full battle readiness. Color drained from Beth's face so fast, Jake thought she might faint. Her hands froze over her console as if the controls had suddenly become white-hot.
Admiral,
she stammered, those are Omega-class battleships. Sir, the galactic treaties strictly forbid Deathworld species from deploying military assets outside. Our home system, if we send those ships, will be violating every peace accord signed in the last century. The Council will screw the treaties, Commander. Jake's voice carried the cold finality of a judge pronouncing a death sentence. Screw the Council. Screw the politics and the handshaking and the diplomatic dance parties. Today we save lives. Beth stared at him as if he'd just announced plans to declare war on the entire galaxy. Which, In a way he had. "Sir, do you understand what you're ordering? Those ships, they're not just weapons. They're apocalypse machines. The galaxy fears them for good reason. If we deploy Omega-class vessels, every species in known space will what?" Jake interrupted, his voice rising to match the fury building in his chest. "Will they condemn us for saving 18 billion? Innocent lives? Will they sanction us for refusing to let children be processed into fuel? Let them try." He turned away from Beth and addressed the entire command center, his voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. "Gentlemen, ladies, today we cross a line that can never be uncrossed. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten those under our protection." The Klaxons began their haunting wail as Terra Prime's most classified hangar bays opened like the gates of hell itself. Deep in the station's armored core, 3 ships that had never been meant to leave human space began their terrifying awakening. But here's the question that would define the next chapter of galactic history, when the galaxy's apex predators finally elite. Bare their fangs, who will be brave enough or foolish enough to stand in their way? Reality tore apart, like wet paper, as 3 Leviathans punched through the fabric of space-time itself. The jump drives discharged their exotic energy in brilliant flashes that could be seen from Proxima 7's surface, announcing the arrival of humanity's most terrible secrets. Captain Mark Stevens felt the familiar gut-trenching sensation of translation drive shutdown aboard the Hellbringer. 23 years of commanding warships, and he still hated that feeling, like having his atoms scattered across the galaxy and reassembled by a drunk technician. But today, that nauseating transition meant 18 billion lives might have a chance. Through the bridge's reinforced viewport, Proxima 7 hung like a blue-green jewel against the cosmic dark, beautiful, peaceful, utterly defenseless. Surrounding it like hungry vultures circling a dying animal were 47 ships that made Mark's blood boil with righteous fury. The Void Hunter fleet hung in perfect predatory formation, their obsidian hulls gleaming with an almost organic malevolence. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destructive engineering, sleek, deadly, and absolutely without mercy. They looked like something that had crawled out of humanity's darkest nightmares and decided to go ship hunting. But here's the thing. Nightmares, they tend to shrink when you turn on the lights. Captain Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh called from the communications station. Her voice tight with controlled anger. "We're receiving multiple targeting locks from the enemy fleet. They're treating us like we're some backwater patrol group." Mark almost laughed. Almost. If only they knew what they were really looking at. The human dreadnoughts were nothing like the elegant alien vessels surrounding Proxima 7, where the Void Hunters built beautiful killing machines. Humans had created something far more terrifying, ugly, brutal, and absolutely unstoppable monuments to survival. 3 kilometers of armored death, bristling with weapon systems that violated every civilized rule of warfare. You see, when your species spends 4 billion years getting kicked in the teeth by evolution, you tend to over-engineer your revenge fantasies. "Open channels to the enemy fleet," Mark ordered, settling into his command chair like a king claiming his throne. "Let's see if these raiders have any sense left." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of barely contained power coursing through the ship's systems. Every human aboard the Hellbringer knew they were about to make galactic history, the kind that gets written in blood and remembered for millennia. "Channel open, Captain," Amy reported. Mark leaned forward, his voice carrying the casual authority of a man who had never lost a battle. "Attention, Void Hunter fleet. This is your only warning. Withdraw immediately from this system, or face complete annihilation."
Yeah.
The response came back faster than Mark had expected, dripping with the kind of arrogance that could only come from a species that had never met anything stronger than themselves. Pathetic mammals. The alien voice was like gravel, mixed with broken glass. "I am War Master Grixtel of the Void Hunter 9th Fleet. You dare threaten us with your primitive vessels? Identify your pathetic ships before we add them to our trophy collection." Trophy collection. Mark felt his smile turn to ice. These monsters weren't just raiders, they were collectors. They kept souvenirs from every species they'd butchered, every world they'd burned, every civilization they'd erased from existence. Today, their collection was about to get a lot smaller. War Master Grixtel, Mark replied, his voice carrying the deadly calm of a predator cornering its prey. This is Captain Mark Stevens of the Terran Federation Omega-class battleship Hellbringer, transmitting our species designation and classification now. He nodded to Amy, who sent the data package that would change everything. The file contained humanity's official galactic registry, including the classification that made every alien species in known space wake up in cold sweats. For 30 seconds, space was filled with nothing but the background radiation of dying stars and the soft hum of advanced technology. Then the Void Hunter channels exploded with panicked chittering and guttural shouts that Mark's translator could barely process. Impossible. Grixtel's voice had lost all its swagger, cracking like thin ice under pressure. Deathworld species are banned from offensive military operations. This violates every treaty, every accord, every civilized law of warfare. Mark's laugh was like winter wind through a graveyard. War Master, let me explain something about treaties. They're written to protect innocent civilizations from monsters like you. Today, we're the protection. But Grixtel wasn't finished making fatal errors in judgment. His next words sealed the fate of every ship in his fleet. You think 3 ships can threaten the might of 47 Void Hunter vessels? We've conquered 1,000 worlds. We've harvested entire species. We fear nothing that crawls from a single pathetic planet. The silence that followed was pregnant with violence. Mark could almost hear the universe holding its breath, waiting to see what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. War Master, Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You've just made 2 critical mistakes. First, you threatened innocence under our protection. Second, and far worse, you assumed we crawled. We didn't crawl from Earth, War Master. We clawed our way up from the bottom of evolution's ladder while everything on our world tried to kill us. Every day, for 4 billion years. He paused, letting that sink in before delivering the final ultimatum. You have exactly 15 seconds to begin your retreat, or you'll learn firsthand why the Galactic Council classified us as a restricted Deathworld species. Choose wisely. Countdown began in Mark's head. 15, 14, 13. The Void Hunter fleet's answer came in the form of 47. Plasma cannons lighting up the darkness of space, their beams converging on the human ships like the fury of angry gods. That was their final mistake. And in the next few minutes, they were about to discover why the galaxy's apex predators had been kept on a leash end. What happened when that leash finally broke? The question was no longer whether the Void Hunters would survive. The question was whether there would be enough left of them to send a warning to the rest of the galaxy. The first volley of Void Hunter plasma fire lit up space like the 4th of July. If the 4th of July was designed by homicidal aliens with serious anger management issues, 47 enemy ships unleashed their fury simultaneously, creating a light show that could probably be seen from neighboring star systems, the plasma beams each one hot enough to melt through a battleship's hull like butter struck the human vessels with the combined force of a small sun-going supernova. For a split second, the 3 human dreadnoughts disappeared entirely behind walls of superheated energy that should have vaporized anything made by mortal hands. Then the light faded. The Void Hunters learned their first lesson about fighting. Deathworlders, we don't build things that break easily. The human shields hadn't just held. They had absorbed that apocalyptic barrage without so much as a flicker. The barrier technology, forged in the crucible of Earth's most devastating wars, had been designed to withstand nuclear bombardment, asteroid impacts, and worse. What the Void Hunters considered their most powerful weapons barely registered as a mild inconvenience. Captain Lisa Hayes aboard the Ragnarok watched her shield indicators with the casual interest of someone checking the weather. Green across the board. It's not even a fluctuation. Well, that was disappointing, she muttered. Then keyed her comm system. All stations. This is Captain Hayes. These boys just brought plasma cannons to an antimatter fight. Let's show them how it's done. Fire Nova cannons, full spread. You know that moment in an action movie when the hero stops playing around and gets serious? This was that moment, except instead of one hero, it was humanity's entire military doctrine, saying, "Hold my beer." The Ragnarok's Nova cannons erupted like the birth of new stars. 6 antimatter shells streaked across space at 90% of light speed, each projectile carrying enough destructive potential to crack continents and boil seas. The lead Void Hunter Cruisera? Magnificent. Kilometer-long predator that had terrorized 100 worlds met the first shell head-on. Physics did what physics does when matter meets antimatter at relativistic speeds. The cruiser didn't explode, so much as it simply stopped existing. 1 microsecond it was there, a proud monument to alien engineering and cruelty. The next microsecond, it was an expanding sphere of plasma hot enough to power a small star. The shockwave hit the surrounding. Void Hunter's ships like a cosmic sledgehammer, sending them tumbling through space like leaves in a hurricane. "This is madness." War Master Grixtel's voice cracked across all frequencies, no longer the arrogant predator, but a terrified animal realizing it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. No civilized species builds weapons this savage. This violates every law of proportional warfare. Captain Ryan Clark of the Apocalypse almost laughed as he heard the transmission. Proportional warfare? These monsters had been about to harvest 18 billion innocent souls, and now they wanted to discuss the rules of engagement. "Target the destroyer formation," Ryan ordered his weapons officer. "Deploy the gravity lance." Let's give them a physics lesson they'll never forget. The gravity lance was humanity's most twisted contribution to the art of warfare, a weapon that turned the fundamental forces of the universe into an instrument of destruction. When most species discovered gravity manipulation, they used it. For peaceful purposes, artificial gravity on ships, elegant transportation systems, beautiful architectural impossibilities. Humans, being humans, immediately figured out how to weaponize it. The beam that erupted from the apocalypse was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were anything but subtle. Space-time itself bent and twisted as the gravity lance struck the enemy formation like the fist of an angry god. 5 Void Hunter destroyers, sleek killing machines that had struck fear into countless civilizations, experienced what it felt like to be at the center of a collapsing star. The ships didn't have time to scream as their hulls were compressed into neutronium. Their crews experienced a brief, terrifying moment of understanding as the laws of physics became their executioner, crushing them down to the atomic level in the span of a heartbeat. But Captain Mark Stevens wasn't finished making his point. The Hellbringer's main weapon monster that the engineering corps had nicknamed, the conversation ender, began its ominous charging cycle. The sound it made was like the universe clearing its throat before delivering bad news. War Master Grixtel, Mark's voice carried across all frequencies with the authority of final judgment. "You made one critical error today. You threatened innocent people under our protection. But your second mistake was even worse. You never faced a species that was born on a world where everything, including the weather, spent 4 billion years trying to perfect new and creative ways to kill us." The planet killer beam that erupted from the Hellbringer was like watching the birth and death of a star compressed into a single moment of pure destruction. The lance of coherent energy, hot enough to boil oceans and bright enough to outshine the systems, sunstruck Grixtel's flagship with the force of divine retribution. The War Master's vessel, along with 3 escort cruisers that had the misfortune of being in the general vicinity, simply ceased to be. It's not destroyed, not demolished, erased, deleted from existence with the casual efficiency of someone clearing unwanted files from a computer. The remaining Void Hunter ships hung in space, like stunned animals, their crews trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had come here expecting to harvest a defenseless world, to add another trophy to their collection of murdered civilizations. Instead, they had found the galaxy's apex predators unchained and absolutely furious. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a physics demonstration with very high stakes. Human weapon systems that had been theoretical nightmares became terrible reality. Void Hunter ships, the terror of 1,000 worlds, were swatted from existence with casual efficiency. The engagement lasted exactly 8 minutes and 43 seconds. When the light show finally ended, 31 Void Hunter vessels had been completely obliterated. 16 more, their hulls cracked in bleeding atmosphere, fled into hyperspace with the desperate panic of prey animals escaping a pack of wolves. Not a single human vessel had suffered so much as a paint scratch. But here's the real question. What happens when word of this battle reaches the rest of the galaxy? What happens when every predatory species in known space realizes that humanity's leash has finally been cut? The answer was about to reshape the balance of power in ways that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The crystal beaches of Proxima 7 had never witnessed anything like this moment in their billion-year history, where hours earlier the cavalry had huddled in terror. Waiting for death to rain from the stars, now millions of rabbit-like beings emerged from their underground shelters to witness something that redefined the word impossible. The scattered remains of what had once been the galaxy's most feared armada drifted like cosmic debris. 16 battered Void Hunter ships limped away into the darkness, their proud formations shattered, their crews traumatized beyond recognition. And chasing them toward the edge of the system were 3 human dreadnoughts that moved with the casual confidence of apex predators, who had just reminded the galaxy why they sat at the top of the food chain. Elder Keftal, a Kaleri historian, who had lived through 3 centuries of peaceful existence, stood on the shore of remembrance with tears streaming down his furry cheeks. His grandchildren pressed close to his sides, their large eyes reflecting the distant flashes of human ships as they secured the system. "Grandfather," whispered young Polara, her voice filled with the kind of awe reserved for miracles, "the Deathworlders came. They really came for us." The old Kalari nodded, unable to speak. In all his years of studying galactic history, he had read the classified reports about humanity's military capabilities. But reading about planet-killing weapons and witnessing them deployed to save your entire species were 2 very different experiences. Ambassador Trillin stood among her people on the capital city's primary communication platform, her diplomatics training warring with emotions she had never expected to feel. Her communication device chimed with an incoming priority transmission, the distinctive harmonic pattern that indicated contact from humanity's command structure. She answered immediately, her paws trembling as Admiral Jake Thompson's weathered face appeared on her display screen. The human leader looked exhausted. It's like a man who had just carried the weight of 18 billion lives on his shoulders and somehow managed not to buckle. "Ambassador Trillin," Jake said, his voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. "Your people are safe. The Void Hunter threat has been neutralized." Trillin, his ears twitched a Kalari expression of overwhelming gratitude that humans had learned to recognize during their years of peaceful cooperation. "Admiral Thompson." She began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Your ships, ... they arrived so quickly. In our darkest hour, when death seemed certain, you came." She paused, and Jake could see the conflict in her large, expressive eyes. "But Admiral, the galactic treaties explicitly forbid Deathworld species from deploying military assets beyond your home system, which you've done today, ... It violates centuries of carefully negotiated accords." Jake's tired smile carried the weight of a decision that would echo through history. "Ambassador, I've been in this uniform for 23 years. I've attended more diplomatic functions than I can count, signed more treaties than any sane person. Should have to read and listen to enough political speeches to make my ears bleed." He leaned forward, and his next words carried the moral authority of absolute conviction. "But some things matter more than politics. Some things matter more than treaties written by politicians who've never seen a battlefield. Your children's lives, your people's freedom, your right to exist without fear, those things were worth any price we might have to pay." Trillin felt her translator struggling with the emotional subtext of the Admiral's words. How do you translate the concept of selfless sacrifice to a species that had never needed to develop such extremes of protective instinct? But across the galaxy, the consequences of humanity's intervention were spreading faster than light itself. Emergency sessions erupted in the Galactic Council chambers like wildfire, as representatives from 2,000 species tried to process what they had just witnessed. The combat footage recorded by automated monitoring stations throughout the Proxima system spread through galactic networks with the viral intensity of the most shocking news in recorded history. Grainy holographic recordings showed human dreadnoughts engaging in combat maneuvers that redefined every military doctrine. In known space, you know how a video of someone doing something impossible goes viral on social media. Now imagine that, but instead of a skateboard trick, it's 3 ships casually dismantling the galaxy's most feared military force in under 9 minutes. Counselor Vex Mirren, of the Hegemonia militant species that had built their entire civilization. Around military might stood before the emergency assembly, with his scaled features twisted in something that might have been fear, might have been rage, or might have been both. Honored representatives. His voice echoed through the crystal amphitheater with the authority of barely controlled panic. What we witness today represents a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. The humans have shattered every military accord, violated every treaty designed to maintain the balance of civilized warfare. His clawed hands gestured wildly at the holographic displays showing human weapons in action. These aren't defensive systems, these are planet killers, starbreakers. Weapons that could threaten the existence of entire civilizations. They must be sanctioned immediately before. Before what? The interruption came from ancient Keeper Morthal of the Eternal Archives, whose species had been observing galactic civilization since before most of the current races had discovered fire. His voice carried the weight of millennia, and when he spoke, even the most aggressive delegates fell silent. Morthal, as ancient form, moved to the center of the chamber with the deliberate grace of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires before they save more innocent lives. Before they demonstrate that there are still species in this galaxy willing to risk everything for the sake of others. The chamber erupted in heated debates and voices calling for immediate military action against humanity. Others demanding that the humans be praised as heroes. But Morthal's next words cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. My fellow representatives, we stand at a crossroads. We can choose to fear these guardians who have just proven their worth, or we can finally acknowledge what we have. Always known in our hearts that sometimes the galaxy needs protectors who are willing to break the rules when innocent lives hang in the balance. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility and terror in equal measure, because everyone in that chamber understood the same fundamental truth. The age of keeping humanity on a leash was over. The only question now was whether the galaxy was ready for what came next. And judging by the fear in some representatives' eyes and the hope in others, the answer was going to reshape the destiny of every living being in known space. But that decision would have to wait, because at that very moment, Admiral Jake Thompson was preparing to address the Galactic Council. Directly in his next words would either start a war or herald the beginning of a new era of galactic peace. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Proxima 7, and the galaxy had not stopped talking. Not for a single day, not for a single hour. The footage of human dreadnoughts dismantling the Void Hunter fleet had become the most watched recording in galactic history, analyzed by military strategists, debated by philosophers, and feared by every predatory species that had built their empires on the suffering of the weak. Now, the most significant gathering of intelligent life in over 1,000 years, the Galactic Council prepared to render judgment on humanity's actions. The massive crystal amphitheater orbiting Harmony Station, a neutral world specifically chosen because no single species could claim ownership, buzzed with the nervous energy of 2,000 different civilizations trying to decide the fate of the galaxy's most dangerous protectors. Admiral Jake Thompson stood alone at the central podium, surrounded by a sea of alien faces that ranged from curious to terrified to openly hostile. Above him, holographic images of every human fleet commander materialized in perfect formation, a silent reminder that Earth's military might was no longer hidden behind diplomatic niceties and treaty restrictions. The weight of this moment pressed down on Jake's shoulders like the gravity of a neutron star. Every word he spoke here would either begin a new golden age of galactic peace or trigger the most devastating war in recorded history. No pressure, right? Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater's acoustics. I stand before you today not as a conqueror, not as a threat, but as a representative of a species that chose to break the rules rather than watch innocents die. The chamber fell silent, the kind of absolute quiet that only comes when 2,000 different species simultaneously hold their breath. Humanity accepts full accountability for our actions 6 months ago, Jake continued, his words measured and deliberate. We violated sacred treaties. We deployed weapons that were never meant to leave our home system. We acted without authorization, without consultation, and without regard for the political consequences. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates like waves on an alien shore. Some voices carried notes of condemnation, others of curiosity, but Jake wasn't finished. And we regret nothing, he declared, his voice rising with the conviction of absolute moral certainty. Not a single shot fired, not a single treaty broken, not a single diplomatic protocol ignored. It's because 18 billion innocent lives were worth more than any piece of paper ever written. The chamber erupted. Delegates leaped to their feet, some applauding, others shouting protests, most simply trying to process the audacity of a species that would openly admit to galactic treaty violations and then claim moral superiority. But, through the chaos, one voice commanded attention. Counselor Vexamiran of the Hegemony rose from his delegation with the measured precision of someone who had wrestled with impossible decisions for months. His scaled features, which had once projected arrogant superiority, now carried something that looked suspiciously like respect. Admiral Thompson, Vexmarin's voice cut through the noise like a plasma cutter through steel. The Terran Federation's unauthorized deployment 6 months ago resulted in the complete annihilation of a Void Hunter battle fleet that had terrorized this galaxy for over 2 centuries. Jake nodded grimly. Yes, Counselor. We are aware of the body count. Your weapons, Vexmiran continued, his tone shifting from accusation to something approaching awe, demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally reshape our understanding of galactic military power. Your dreadnoughts single-handedly redefined what it means to project force in this galaxy. The chamber held its collective breath. This was the moment of judgment, the crossroads where galactic civilization would either embrace its protectors or condemn them as too dangerous to exist. You know that moment in a courtroom drama when the jury delivers the verdict that changes everything? This was that moment, except instead of 12 humans in a box, it was 2,000 alien species, deciding whether humanity would be the galaxy's salvation or its executioner. Therefore, Vexamiran announced, his voice carrying the weight of historical inevitability, after 6 months of debate, analysis, and soul-searching that has consumed every major government in known space, the Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision. The word unanimous hit the chamber like a shockwave. The 2,000 species agreeing on anything was historically unprecedented. 2,000 species agreeing on humanity's fate was nothing short of miraculous. The Galactic Council formally requests that humanity assume the role of Galactic Defense Force, Vexmiran declared, his words echoing through the amphitheater like thunder. The Deathworld treaties are hereby suspended indefinitely. Earth's military forces are authorized to deploy anywhere in Council space where innocent lives face extinction from aggressive action. The chamber didn't just explode, it went supernova. Delegates were cheering, crying, arguing, and in at least 3 cases, apparently having religious experiences right there in their seats. The sound was like every sports stadium, concert venue, a political rally in human history happening simultaneously. But through the chaos, an ancient voice commanded respect. Ancient Keeper Morthal, of the eternal archives of being so old, that his species remembered the galaxy when most current civilizations were still learning to make fire, raised his crystalline form, and spoke with the authority of deep time itself. Let the record show, Morthal's voice somehow carried over the tumult, that on this day, in this place, the galaxy's apex predators officially became its greatest protectors. Jake felt the weight of 1,000 worlds settle on his shoulders. Like a mantle he could never remove, The responsibility was crushing, terrifying, and absolutely sacred all at once. "We accept this duty," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "But understand this, we will not be your overlords. We will not be your rulers. We are your sword against the darkness, your shield against those who would harm the innocent. Nothing more, nothing less." Across human space, from Terra Prime to the furthest colonial outposts, battleship crews received new orders that would reshape their lives forever. The age of hiding humanity's true capabilities was officially over. Earth's deadliest children would now patrol the cosmic deep, ensuring that no desperate cry for help would ever again go unanswered. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't happening in council chambers or military command centers. In the depths of space, in hidden bases, in secret meetings, predatory civilizations that had built their empires on conquest and suffering began making very different plans. Because a new phrase was spreading through galactic languages, whispered in starport bars and transmitted through encrypted channels, spoken with equal parts terror and hope by every species that had ever feared the night. The Deathworlders are watching, and for the first time in galactic history, the monsters that lurked in the darkness between stars were afraid. The end.